we learned from CNN's Mark Morales about this new information that apparently the suspect had a beef with a fellow coworker, then showed up with a weapon, opened fire on that coworker, and then shot four others. And of course, we've learned about how other soldiers jumped in to subdue him. He was taken into custody very quickly. Right now, the base is back to normal operations coming from the standpoint of all the gates back here open. This place is massive. As someone who's been in this area at this base several times before, I can tell you this is like a mini city here. It's one of the largest bases, of course, across from the Mississippi, and people know this for how much work this base does across the world. But we do know the soldiers who were injured in this suffered those injuries. We know they will survive. 3 needed surgery. But listen to the general talk about what happened here today and how soldiers jumped in to help out.
Soldiers in the area that witnessed the shooting immediately and without hesitation tackled the soldier, subdued him, that allowed law enforcement to then take him into custody.
So, Jake, I've been able to talk to a couple soldiers through text message, and they were able to tell me, look, they were shocked by this. This was put on lockdown. They were worried about what was going on. We do know apparently this soldier bought this weapon back in May in Florida. I know several federal agents have been trying to track down where this gun originated from, but we now know through that CNN reporting from Mark Morales that they were able to track this gun back to the purchase in Florida in May, and there was some disagreement at work, and then he showed up with that gun and opened fire. Hopefully to get more information about the motive. We know the suspect is now in military custody. A lot of times, Jake, when we talk about cases like this, you think about a first court appearance. That's something that we will probably not see in terms of him being held in front of the camera and facing a judge. So we'll have to see what he faces. But also the good news here, even after 2 soldiers had to be moved to Savannah to get that expert trauma 1 level care, that all the soldiers involved in this should survive. So people are in shock here, especially in the small community that surrounds this area. But at the same time, this is going to turn out with those soldiers being able to make it through this. Jake?
Ryan, can you talk about any of the major questions investigators are still seeking answers to?
Well, I think one of the things that they'll be focused on is, one, his preparation in terms of bringing that gun onto the base and showing up at that facility. There's been a lot of question about what happened preceding that shooting. So, of course, they'll analyze the gun, they'll see what happened. There's also been that conversation about him being pulled over for DUI. So I'm sure they'll be scrubbing through his history to figure out exactly what started this sort of cascading events that may have led to this shooting, and what could make someone so angry enough to show up to work with a weapon to shoot a coworker. Again, this is a large footprint area. Everything around here is touched by this military base. Even on the way in here, it really shocks you in terms of all the firepower that you see here, but at the same time, weapons are usually under control in this area. So, Jake, just a lot of questions about how this happened and what was his motivation, even after we know it was a beef.
Yeah, Ryan Young at Fort Stewart, thanks so much. Let's bring in Donnell Harvin. He's the former chief of Homeland Security and Intelligence for the D.C. government. Also with us, Darren Porcher, former NYPD lieutenant. Donnell, what do you make of these new details that the suspect had a disagreement or a beef with one coworker the day before and then allegedly brought a gun to the workplace today?
Jake, this isn't that dissimilar from other workplace violence we've seen in other settings. I think what's so shocking is that it happens on a tightly secured military base. I'll also add that the Department of Defense, after the Navy Yard shooting, which you recall in DC, implemented a very robust program to detect what we call insider threats. These threats that emanate from inside your organizations, in this particular case, the DoD, are extremely hard to detect, extremely hard to interdict and deter. And so they'll be looking at that, I'm sure, at the Pentagon over the next days and weeks on how they could have perhaps prevented this.
Darren, what do you think investigators are looking into right now?
Well, you're going to have CID, Criminal Investigations Division of the Army, that's going to investigate this. I'm a former executive officer in the Army, so on many occasions I've introduced discipline against soldiers. The investigators are going to sit down with everyone that worked in that workplace area. He was a logistics specialist, so I take it he worked in a warehouse facility. So All of those individuals are going to be interviewed. But what's really interesting about this is there was a 40-minute gap from the time when the shooting started to when the shooter was quote unquote taken into custody, which is kind of strange because there were people that were in that workplace that were able to take him down and I want to say neutralize him pending the arrival of law enforcement. But once again, it's going to be a contingent of various interviews as to what the dispute was, and did anyone have information that revealed there was a propensity for him to come back and introduce violence in the workplace.
Donnell, is it odd that the suspect's chain of command did not know about his recent DUI? Is that something that the local law enforcement would automatically notify the military about, or the military would be alerted about in some way?
I mean, not necessarily if you don't disclose to the law enforcement what your occupation is, but I will tell you that once again, this is an aspect that came out of the after action report from the Navy Yard shooting. There was a lot of red flags with that individual shooter who took the lives of 12 people rather, at the Navy Yard that day. And there was a whole host of things, interactions with law enforcement that weren't picked up. And so after that, the Department of Defense started doing more regular background checks. All these individuals who are on bases, whether they're uniformed or not, go through a rigorous background check process. But what they found is that once you go through that initial process, they weren't doing follow-ups. And so those follow-ups that have been in place now are there to pick up things that happen just like this. And hopefully they'll look at that and see if that would have triggered some follow-up investigation in this individual. But once again, Jake, unless he told somebody or he made a threat, it's really, really hard to interdict and stop somebody who's that determined to hurt somebody at their workplace.
Darren, do you think other U.S. military installations need to be doing security reviews in the wake of this shooting, maybe just to fend off any copycats, or maybe there are lessons to be learned?
There's going to be an after action review that's going to be quite telling to other military bases, be it the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. And that information would be extracted to make a more robust security component in any base. But what's interesting about this is you, as an active duty soldier, you have an access badge that affords you the ability to get on base. Those individuals that have access badges are not searched as they enter the base. Bear in mind, this was a personal weapon that he came on base with. And we have to trust our soldiers because these are the individuals that we arm in combat to protect and defend the democracy of the United States abroad. So we're just not going to search them when they come on base. And this was one of these things that more so slipped through the cracks. But I agree that we need to do a more robust job in terms of creating that security matrix on base.
All right, Darren Porcher and Donnell Harvin, thanks to both of you. Unfortunately, this is not the first time a deadly shooting took place on a U.S. military base. CNN's Brian Todd joins us now. Brian?
Well, Jake, Brigadier General John Lubis today, he's the commander of the 3rd Infantry Division at Fort Stewart. He told reporters this afternoon that other soldiers in the area who witnessed this shooting, in his words, quote, immediately and without hesitation, tackled the alleged shooter. Now, General Lubis said without a doubt that prevented more casualties, but there have been other mass shootings at U.S. military bases where some worst-case scenarios did, in fact, unfold. November 5th, 2009, a U.S. Army major and psychiatrist at Fort Hood, Texas. He shot more than 40 people. He killed 13 of them. He was shooting his fellow soldiers at a processing center on the base at Fort Hood. Prosecutors said the shooter, an American-born Muslim, underwent a progressive radicalization that had led to that massacre. That shooter was convicted and sentenced to death. He is currently being held at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. This remains the deadliest shooting ever on a U.S. military base, that shooting at Fort Hood on 2009. Now, on December 16th, 2013, a defense contract worker and former Navy reservist killed 12 people at the Navy Yard right here in Washington, D.C. At least 8 other people were injured in that shooting. The shooter was then killed in a gun battle with police. Subsequent investigations found that the shooter had suffered mental health problems, but despite those issues, he still held on to a security clearance with the Navy, allowing him access to that base. Jake, I remember you and I both covered that shooting, and that whole issue with his access and the clearance was a big deal at the time. Now, on April 2nd, 2014, another shooting, let me just get to that one, that was it, another shooting at Fort Hood in Texas. A soldier opened fire on fellow service members, killing 3 people, wounding more than a dozen before he killed himself. That shooting actually played out in multiple buildings at the base on Fort Hood as the shooter moved around. That was before he was engaged by military police. And on December 6th, 2019, an aviation student from Saudi Arabia opened fire in a classroom at Naval Air Station Pensacola in Florida. He killed 3 people and injured another dozen people, including 2 sheriff's deputies. The shooter was killed at the scene by deputies. Investigations later revealed that the shooter had self-radicalized and had been in contact with al-Qaeda operatives in the years prior to the shooting. Jake, in all of these incidents, including today's shooting at Fort Stewart, one common thread: the shooters all had access to the bases in question. As for the weapon, well, today General Lubis said the Fort Stewart shooter had used his own weapon, a handgun, not a military-issued weapon. But Jake, horrible precedents for the shooting today. Thankfully, no one was killed today in that incident.
Yeah, Brian Todd, thanks so much.